Jack Harrison, a proud Marine veteran, and his loyal service dog Charlie walk into a store for a simple errand. But nothing about this day would be ordinary. When the store's manager denies Charlie entry, what starts as a small confrontation quickly gains national attention. With Jack's quiet dignity and Charlie's unwavering loyalty, their story raises questions about respect, service, and the sacrifices made by our nation's heroes. How far will this go, and who will step up to support Jack and Charlie? Subscribe to the channel and follow to see how this story unfolds. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Jack Harrison leaned heavily on his cane as he adjusted his grip on the leash of his service dog Charlie. The German shepherd's steady gaze seemed to say, "I've got you," a sentiment Jack needed more than ever. For the former Marine, the transition to civilian life had been anything but smooth. His injuries, both seen and unseen, were daily reminders of battles fought far from home. Charlie had been there through it all. More than just a service animal, Charlie was Jack's lifeline. Trained to assist with mobility and detect the onset of anxiety attacks, the dog had pulled Jack from the dark abyss of PTSD on more occasions than he cared to count. The VA had provided Charlie after months of paperwork and appeals, but the bond they formed was something no bureaucracy could quantify. Jack's day had started as it often did: early rising, a cup of black coffee, and a short walk with Charlie through the neighborhood. He preferred the mornings when the world was still quiet and the air carried a sense of calm. It was the kind of peace he wished could last. But peace rarely did. As they approached the local store, Charlie trotted beside Jack, ears perked and tail wagging. The simple errand of picking up household essentials should have been uneventful, but Jack knew better. Even in his small town, there was always someone with a sideways glance or a judgmental stare. People didn't understand that service dogs were not pets, but crucial companions. They were too focused on the leash, the fur, or the wagging tail to grasp the deeper meaning. The sliding doors of the store whooshed open, and Jack entered, Charlie walking calmly at his side. They moved toward the produce aisle, the rhythmic clicking of Charlie's claws on the tile floor a comforting background noise. Jack felt the usual mix of emotions, a combination of pride in Charlie's discipline and the simmering anticipation of confrontation. He'd been through this before. It didn't take long as Jack bent slightly to inspect a bag of apples. A stern voice broke through the aisle's ambient hum. "Sir, dogs aren't allowed in the store." Jack straightened slowly, his body stiff from years of wear and tear. The man addressing him was the store manager, a younger guy in his early 30s with neatly combed hair and a badge that read Brian. His tone wasn't aggressive, but it carried an air of authority that rubbed Jack the wrong way. "This is a service animal," Jack replied evenly, patting Charlie's head. "He's allowed under the ADA." Brian frowned, glancing at Charlie as if searching for some visual cue that the dog wasn't just a pet. "I'm sorry, but we have a strict no pets policy. Customers have complained in the past." Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice, but made his words deliberate. "I'm a Marine veteran. This is my service dog. He's trained and certified. I'm well within my rights to have him here." The declaration seemed to catch Brian off guard, but he quickly recovered, shaking his head. "Look, I'm just doing my job. If you want to shop here, the dog has to stay outside." For a moment, Jack said nothing. He'd been in far more tensed standoffs than this, but the sheer absurdity of the situation stung. A dog that had saved his life countless times was being treated like an inconvenience. Charlie stood quietly, his calm demeanor an unspoken contrast to the tension. "Do you know what this dog has done for me?" Jack asked, his voice firm but calm. Do you know what he's trained to do?" "I'm sure he's a great dog," Brian replied, his tone edging toward impatience. "But rules are rules." By now, a few shoppers had stopped to watch the exchange. Jack could feel their eyes on him, a mix of curiosity and judgment. A young woman in yoga pants holding a phone was subtly filming the interaction, her gaze darting between Jack and Brian. Jack took a deep breath. This isn't about rules, it's about respect. Respect for those who served, and for the animals that help us keep going. The manager folded his arms. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Jack tightened his grip on Charlie's leash. For a split second he considered standing his ground, but years of discipline urged him to avoid escalation. He'd fought for bigger causes than this and knew when to pick his battles. Without another word, he turned and began walking toward the exit, Charlie faithfully at his side. As Jack crossed the parking lot, the weight of the encounter settled heavily on his shoulders. It wasn't just the humiliation of being turned away. It was the broader reminder of how disconnected some people were from the struggles veterans face daily. He paused near his truck, leaning against it for support. Charlie nudged his leg gently, sensing his distress. "You're a good boy, Charlie," Jack murmured, scratching the dog behind his ears. "You're always a good boy." The sound of hurried footsteps made Jack glance over his shoulder. The young woman with the phone was jogging toward him, her face flushed but determined. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her phone. "I'm so sorry about what just happened. I saw everything, and I think it's awful. People need to know this kind of thing still happens." Jack frowned, unsure of her intent. "What are you talking about?" "I recorded the whole thing," she explained. "If you're okay with it, I'd like to share it online. People need to see how unfair this was." Jack hesitated. He wasn't one for public attention, but a small part of him wondered if this could spark a larger conversation about the challenges veterans faced. Finally, he nodded. "Do what you think is right." The woman smiled, her resolve clear. "Thank you, and thank you for your service." As she walked away, Jack felt a mix of unease and hope. He didn't know what would come of the video, but he had learned long ago that even small actions could ripple into something bigger. Charlie sat by his side, his calm presence a grounding force. "We'll see where this goes, buddy," Jack said, giving Charlie a final pat before opening the truck door. "But one way or another, people need to understand." With that, Jack climbed into the truck, and as Charlie settled in the passenger seat, the familiar feeling of resolve began to take hold. This wasn't just about him. It was about respect, dignity, and ensuring that no one else would have to go through the same. Jack spent the rest of the day trying to push the incident at the store out of his mind, but the encounter weighed heavily on him. He had experienced his fair share of disrespect as a veteran trying to reintegrate into civilian life, but this one stung differently. It wasn't just the dismissive attitude of the manager. It was the principal. The store had denied not just him, but Charlie, who was more than a companion. He was Jack's lifeline. That evening, Jack settled into his modest living room, Charlie sprawled comfortably at his feet. He flipped through the local news channels, but his mind was elsewhere. He was about to call it a night when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. Picking it up, he saw a message from a younger neighbor, Katie. "Hey, Mr. Harrison, just saw you on TikTok. Are you okay?" Jack squinted at the screen, his brow furrowing. TikTok? He barely understood social media, much less why someone would be talking about him on it. A second later, Katie sent a link to a video. He clicked it, and the familiar scene from the store unfolded. There he was, standing calmly while explaining Charlie's role to the manager. The caption read, "Veteran and service dog denied entry. This isn't okay." The video had been posted only a few hours ago, but already had thousands of views, likes, and comments. The camera panned to Charlie as Jack spoke in the video. Even through the screen, Charlie's disciplined presence shone. Viewers were captivated, commenting things like, "This dog is more trained than most people I know," and "How could anyone deny a veteran with a service animal?" Jack sighed, setting the phone down. He wasn't sure how he felt about the exposure. On one hand, it highlighted an issue he believed in, but on the other, he wasn't a fan of being the center of attention. He leaned back, glancing down at Charlie, whose tail thumped gently against the carpet. "Well, buddy, looks like we've gone viral," he muttered, scratching behind Charlie's ear. Charlie responded with a soft nudge of his nose, as if to say, "I've got your back." The next morning, Jack woke up to find his phone buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, and notifications poured in, many from strangers offering support. The video had spread overnight, picked up by larger accounts and even a local news outlet. It wasn't just comments anymore. People were tagging organizations and local veterans groups, demanding action. Katie knocked on his door later that morning, holding her own phone and looking slightly sheepish. "Mr. Harrison, I hope you don't mind, but I shared the video with a few groups last night. I thought it might help." Jack nodded, appreciating her good intentions. "It's all right, Katie. I just hope this doesn't spiral into something I can't control." Her face lit up. "It already has. Have you seen the comments? People are furious. They're calling the store and asking for the manager to apologize." Jack wasn't sure how to feel about it. He didn't want the situation to turn into an internet mob, but he also felt validated knowing others saw the problem. A part of him hoped this might lead to a broader conversation about veterans and service animals. By the afternoon, the situation had escalated. The store released a short statement doubling down on its policy, claiming it was for health and safety reasons. The statement only fueled the fire, drawing the attention of a prominent veteran advocacy group, Veterans United, which posted, "A decorated veteran and his service dog deserve better than this. We stand with Jack Harrison." That post brought a flood of media attention. A reporter from a local news station showed up at Jack's house, asking for an interview. Jack agreed reluctantly, more for Charlie's sake than his own. On camera, Jack explained the importance of service dogs for veterans. He shared how Charlie had saved him countless times, helping him navigate panic attacks, retrieve dropped items, and provide comfort in moments of emotional distress. The segment aired that evening, featuring a clip of Charlie sitting stoically by Jack's side, his soft brown eyes conveying more emotion than words ever could. Meanwhile, the pressure on the store mounted. The TikTok video surpassed 1 million views by nightfall, with hashtags like "Respect Our Veterans" and "Service Dog Rights" trending. A petition demanding the store change its policies garnered thousands of signatures in mere hours. Despite the chaos, Jack maintained his calm demeanor. He wasn't interested in revenge or vilifying anyone. He just wanted people to understand the critical role service animals played in the lives of veterans. As the night wore on, he reflected on the whirlwind of events. "Charlie," he said, glancing at the dog lying by the couch, "this thing's taken on a life of its own. Let's just hope it leads somewhere good." Charlie wagged his tail in agreement, his unshakable loyalty a reminder that Jack wasn't alone in this fight. But deep down, Jack knew the situation was far from over. The issue was no longer just about him and Charlie. It was about respect for all veterans and the invisible battles they fought every day. What had started as a quiet shopping trip had become a much louder call for change, and Jack was ready to see it through. Jack Harrison woke to the sound of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. Charlie, ever vigilant, raised his head from the bed at the noise, but quickly rested his chin back down, sensing no immediate danger. Jack rubbed his temples, still trying to process the chaos that had unfolded in the last 24 hours. As he reached for his phone, the screen was lit up with notifications, text messages, missed calls, and countless social media alerts. The video from the store confrontation had gone viral. What started as a seemingly small incident had grown into a full-blown movement online. Strangers from across the country were flooding Jack's inbox with messages of support, sharing their own stories of veterans, service dogs, and the challenges they faced. Hashtags like veterans' rights and service dog respect trended on platforms Jack barely understood. He let out a long sigh and muttered, "What did we get ourselves into, Charlie?" Charlie, in response, wagged his tail and licked Jack's hand, ever the optimist in their partnership. Jack scrolled through his messages, his brows furrowing as he realized the scale of the situation. Among the texts, one stood out, a message from Veterans United, a well-known advocacy group. "Mr. Harrison, we'd like to offer our support in addressing what happened. Your story is a powerful reminder of the challenges our heroes face daily. Please, let us know if we can help amplify your voice." Jack leaned back, trying to gather his thoughts. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. As a Marine, his focus had always been on the mission and his brothers in arms. Now, he found himself at the center of a public conversation about respect and rights. Part of him wanted to retreat into the shadows, but another part, a deeper, quieter part, knew this was a battle worth fighting. Later that morning, Jack received another knock at his door. This time, it wasn't his neighbor, Katie. A man in his mid-40s, dressed sharply in a suit, stood on the porch. "Mr. Harrison," the man said, extending a hand, "I'm Anthony Carter with Veterans United. I hope I'm not intruding." Jack shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Come in. I assume you're here about all this." He gestured vaguely toward his phone, still buzzing with activity. Anthony chuckled. "Yes, sir. We've been monitoring the response to your story. It's gaining traction at an unprecedented rate. Honestly, your situation has struck a chord with people." Jack nodded slowly. "I don't mind the attention, as long as it's focused on the right thing. It's not about me. It's about the disrespect veterans face and the need for better awareness about service animals." Anthony leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Exactly. That's why we want to help. We've already mobilized some of our networks to amplify your story, but we think this could be bigger. We're arranging for media coverage and even contacting local politicians who might be willing to speak out. We just need your permission to proceed." Jack hesitated, glancing at Charlie, who had positioned himself protectively by Jack's chair. "I'll do it, but only if we keep it focused on the broader issue. I don't want this turning into a personal crusade." Anthony smiled. "Understood, sir. You have our word." By midday, the story had exploded beyond social media. National news outlets began picking it up, framing it as a powerful narrative about respect, dignity, and the unspoken struggles of American veterans. Jack found himself fielding calls of American veterans groups and even old friends who had seen the story and wanted to offer their support. The backlash against the store was equally swift. Customers bombarded their phone lines and social media pages with complaints, and the store's initial statement about health and safety was being torn apart in comment sections. A popular journalist on Twitter wrote, "If a store can't make room for a veteran and his service dog, what kind of community are they trying to create? Shameful." The turning point came when a Pentagon official weighed in. During a press briefing unrelated to the incident, a reporter asked about Jack's story, framing it as an example of systemic issues veterans face. The spokesperson responded with a measured yet pointed comment. Every veteran who has served this country deserves our utmost respect and support, including accommodations for their service animals. The Department of Defense stands behind Mr. Harrison and others like him." The clip went viral, adding even more fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, Jack struggled to adjust to his new role as the face of a growing movement. He agreed to an interview with a national news network, where he sat calmly beside Charlie, sharing his story with millions of viewers. "Charlie isn't just a dog," Jack said, his voice steady but firm. "He's my partner, my lifeline. Without him, I wouldn't have made it through some of the darkest days of my life. This isn't just about me. It's about every veteran out there who's fought for this country and comes home to a world that doesn't always understand their struggles." The interviewer leaned in, her expression empathetic. "What would you say to people who don't understand the role service animals play?" Jack looked down at Charlie, who was sitting dutifully by his side. "I'd say walk a mile in our shoes. You might not see the scars we carry, but they're there. Charlie helps me carry those scars, and every time someone like that store manager denies entry, it's like saying those scars don't matter." The segment aired that evening, and the response was overwhelming. Jack's quiet dignity and Charlie's steadfast presence resonated deeply with viewers. Donations to veteran support organizations surged, and countless people reached out to share their own stories of service animals making a difference in their lives. The store, meanwhile, was in damage control mode. "Yacht, yacht, 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 yacht." The manager, Brian, released a video apologizing for the incident, but it came across as insincere and rehearsed. "We didn't mean to disrespect Mr. Harrison," he said, glancing nervously at the camera. "We were simply enforcing policy." The apology did little to quell the backlash. If anything, it made things worse. Commenters accused the store of doubling down rather than taking meaningful action. The pressure mounted for the company's CEO to issue a statement. Veterans United seized the moment, organizing a rally in support of Jack and other veterans with service animals. Held in front of the store, the event drew hundreds of people, including local politicians, veterans, and community members. Jack spoke briefly, his words simple but powerful. "This isn't about one store or one manager," he said. "It's about ensuring that no veteran ever feels unwelcome in their own community. It's about respect." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Jack stepped back, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since his days in the Marines. Charlie, ever at his side, seemed to sense it too, and wagging his tail and nudging Jack's leg gently. As the rally concluded, Jack couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had spiraled. A part of him still longed for the quiet life he'd carved out with Charlie, but he knew this was a fight worth fighting. The incident at the store had ignited a conversation that went far beyond his own experience, shining a light on the broader issues faced by veterans across the country. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, something that could truly make a difference, and with Charlie by his side, he knew he had the strength to see it through. The rally outside the store marked a turning point, but it was far from the end of the story. As the crowd dispersed, Jack Harrison stood quietly, with Charlie by his side, watching people shake hands and exchange stories of support. Veterans in wheelchairs, families with service dogs, and advocates holding signs with slogans like "Respect our heroes" and "Service dogs are lifelines" made the scene feel almost surreal to Jack. The sense of unity was heartening, but Jack knew this was just the beginning. As he headed back to his truck with Charlie, Anthony Carter from Veterans United caught up with him. "Jack, Anthony began, slightly out of breath. "You should know, we've got the Pentagon watching now." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the Pentagon? What do they have to do with this?" He smiled, his voice laced with excitement. "They issued a statement supporting you, and they're considering using your case to promote awareness about veteran reintegration issues. This has gotten bigger than we could have imagined." Jack nodded, letting the weight of the situation sink in. He'd always thought of himself as just one man, one voice, but now his story was becoming a catalyst for something far larger. The next day, Jack received an unexpected call from an unknown number. When he picked up, the deep, commanding voice on the other end introduced himself as Colonel Mark Whitaker, a Pentagon liaison for Veteran Affairs. "Mr. Harrison," the colonel said, "I've been following your situation closely, and I want to personally thank you for shedding light on an issue that's been overlooked for far too long." Jack, unsure how to respond, simply said, "I appreciate that, sir." "We're taking action," Colonel Whitaker continued. "The Department of Defense is working on a public campaign to educate businesses and communities about the rights of service dog handlers, particularly veterans like yourself. We'd like to feature you and Charlie as part of that initiative." Jack hesitated, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the request. "I'm just a guy trying to make sure my service dog can walk into a store with me," he said. "I'm not sure I'm the face you're looking for." "You are exactly the face we need," the colonel countered. "You're real. You represent countless veterans who face these struggles every day. Your story has already inspired so many. It's time to amplify it." After a long pause, Jack agreed. "If it helps other veterans, I'll do it." As the Pentagon's involvement deepened, the store's corporate office could no longer ignore the backlash. The CEO of the chain, a polished woman named Linda Stone, released a statement acknowledging the incident and announcing plans to retrain staff on ADA compliance. But the damage was done. Veterans United called out the store for reacting only after public outrage, and Linda's statement felt like a hollow attempt at salvaging the company's reputation. Jack, however, wasn't interested in the corporate blame game. For him, the real goal was ensuring that no veteran or service dog handler faced the same disrespect he had. Days later, Jack found himself sitting in a small conference room at the local VA office, a camera crew setting up around him. The Pentagon's public awareness campaign was in full swing, and Jack and Charlie were its centerpiece. As the lights were adjusted and microphones clipped to his shirt, Jack stroked Charlie's head to calm his nerves. The interviewer, a kind woman with a soft demeanor, began with simple questions about Jack's military service. He spoke about his time as a Marine, his tours overseas, and the injuries that changed his life forever. But when the questions turned to Charlie, Jack's voice softened. Jack explained why he had to play, instead of spending time with his wife. The interviewer leaned forward and, "What did it feel like when the store manager asked you to leave?" Jack sighed. "It felt like being told I didn't belong. Like the sacrifices I made didn't matter, but that it wasn't just about me, it was about Charlie, too. He's trained to do a job, and that job is to keep me alive." The footage of Jack's interview, paired with clips of Charlie in action, became the centerpiece of the Pentagon's campaign. It aired on national television and circulated widely online, sparking further conversations about the challenges veterans faced in civilian life. As the campaign gained momentum, Jack began receiving letters from veterans across the country. Some shared stories of similar encounters, while others simply thanked him for giving them hope. One letter, from a young Marine who had recently been paired with his first service dog, stood out to Jack. "I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again," the letter read, "but seeing you and Charlie gives me hope. If you can do it, maybe I can too." Jack folded the letter carefully, placing it on the mantel next to a photo of his platoon. He looked down at Charlie, who was resting on the floor, and gave him a small smile. "You see, buddy," Jack said, "this isn't just about us. We're making a difference." Charlie responded with a soft wag of his tail, his brown eyes full of loyalty and understanding. Together, they were proof that even the smallest actions could ripple out to create something much bigger than themselves. The store's parking lot was unusually crowded, filled with reporters, local officials, and community members. At the center of the commotion stood a hastily constructed podium adorned with the company's logo. Jack Harrison stood off to the side with Charlie, quietly observing the scene. He had no interest in theatrics, but had agreed to attend after Anthony Carter convinced him it was an opportunity to highlight the importance of change. "Mr. Harrison, are you ready?" Anthony asked, adjusting his tie nervously. Jack glanced down at Charlie, whose calm demeanor steadied him. "I'm not the one who has to apologize." Anthony smirked. "True, but you're the one everyone's here to see." The CEO, Linda Stone, stepped up to the podium. Her sharp navy suit and composed expression betrayed none of the turmoil her company had faced in recent days. The crowd hushed as she began to speak. "Good afternoon," she started, her voice steady but measured. "I want to begin by acknowledging the mistake made by our store, and more importantly, the harm it caused to Mr. Jack Harrison, a Marine veteran, and his service dog Charlie." Linda paused, glancing at Jack. He stood tall, his military posture evident even in civilian clothes. Charlie sat obediently beside him, his presence as commanding as his owner's. "What happened here was unacceptable," Linda continued. "It was a failure not only to Mr. Harrison, but to all veterans who have served our country and rely on service animals to navigate the challenges they face every day." There was a ripple of murmurs from the crowd, some nodding in agreement, while others held signs with messages like, "Respect veterans," and "Service dogs are heroes too." Linda's voice softened. "We recognize that our response lacked compassion and understanding, and for that I offer my deepest apologies. To make amends, we are implementing immediate changes, including mandatory ADA compliance training for all employees and a donation of $50,000 to Veterans United to support their work with veterans and service animals." The crowd responded with scattered applause, though Jack remained impassive. He appreciated the gesture, but he knew this moment was about more than a corporate apology. It was about setting an example. Linda turned toward him. "Mr. Harrison, I want to personally apologize to you. I hope you'll accept this as a first step toward making things right." Jack nodded slightly, then stepped forward as the crowd fell silent. He wasn't one for public speeches, but he understood the weight of this moment. "Thank you, Ms. Stone," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I accept your apology, but I want to be clear. This isn't just about me or Charlie. This is about every veteran who's come home to a world that doesn't always understand their struggles." He paused, glancing at the crowd. "Charlie isn't just a dog, he's a lifeline. Service animals give veterans like me the strength to keep going. It's not enough to apologize. We need to make sure this never happens again, to anyone." The crowd erupted into applause, and Jack stepped back, relieved to have said his piece. Anthony gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "You nailed it," Anthony said with a grin. "That's exactly what people needed to hear." As the event wrapped up, Linda approached Jack once more, this time away from the cameras. "I truly am sorry," she said quietly. "Thank you for your service and for your patience." Jack studied her for a moment, then extended his hand. "Let's hope we can turn this into something good." Linda shook his hand, her expression earnest. "I believe we already have." Jack walked away from the podium, the tension in his shoulders easing. He didn't seek validation or applause, but he couldn't deny the sense of closure the moment provided. Beside him, Charlie walked confidently, his tail wagging slightly. As they approached the edge of the parking lot, a young boy holding his father's hand ran up to Jack. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for what you did." Jack crouched to the boy's level, ruffling Charlie's ears. "Thank you for saying that, and remember, always be kind. It makes a difference." The boy nodded enthusiastically before running back to his father. Jack straightened, a small smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was standing on solid ground again. "Come on, Charlie," he said, patting the dog's side. "We've got work to do." Together they left the crowd behind, ready to face whatever came next. The sun dipped low on the horizon as Jack Harrison drove home from the store's apology event. The road stretched out ahead, bathed in the golden hues of evening. Charlie rested in the passenger seat, his head on his paws, but his alert eyes occasionally flicked toward Jack. As they pulled into the driveway of Jack's modest home, a sense of relief settled over him. The day had been emotionally taxing, but it had also been a triumph. Not for him personally, but for the larger cause he now represented. Jack barely had time to step inside before his phone buzzed again. It had been non-stop for days. Messages of support, requests for interviews, and updates from Veterans United had flooded his inbox. This time, it was Anthony Carter. "Jack," Anthony began, his voice buzzing with energy even through the phone, "you're not going to believe this." "Please speak to me of speedy recovery and ensure I'm on the right path as this begins to be difficult. The Pentagon just announced they're naming you and Charlie as honorary ambassadors for their new service dog awareness initiatives. You'll be working with national campaigns to educate the public and advocate for veterans' rights." Jack blinked, momentarily speechless. "Ambassadors? Me? Anthony, I'm just a guy trying to live his life. I didn't ask for all this." "I know," Anthony said, his tone softening. "But that's exactly why you're the perfect person for this. You didn't seek out the spotlight. It found you. Because you're real. And because you care." Jack looked down at Charlie, who tilted his head as if understanding the conversation. "All right," Jack said finally. "If it helps others like me, I'll do it." Over the next few weeks, Jack and Charlie became unlikely symbols of resilience and advocacy. Their faces appeared on posters and videos for the Pentagon's campaign, the slogan, "They've served us, now let's serve them," prominently displayed. Jack traveled to schools, businesses, and community centers, sharing his story and educating people about the critical role service dogs played in the lives of veterans. One particularly memorable visit took place at an elementary school. Standing before a room full of wide-eyed children, Jack felt a mix of nerves and pride. He crouched beside Charlie, who sat patiently, his tongue lolling happily. "Who here loves dogs?" Jack asked. Nearly every hand shot up, accompanied by excited giggles. "This is Charlie," he continued. "He's more than just my best friend. He's a service dog, and that means he helps me when I'm feeling scared or when my body isn't working the way it should. And you know what? He's helped me more than I can say." One little girl raised her hand. "How does he help you?" Jack smiled. "Well, sometimes my brain remembers things from when I was a Marine, things that make me feel like I'm still in danger, but Charlie senses when I'm upset and he helps calm me down. He reminds me that I'm safe." The girl's face lit up. "Charlie's like a superhero." Jack chuckled. "You're right. He is." Back home, Jack's days slowly returned to a sense of normalcy, at least as normal as life could be after such a whirlwind. The local community, galvanized by Jack's story, had rallied around veterans in ways Jack hadn't seen before. Small businesses displayed signs reading, "Veterans Welcome," and several stores added training sessions for staff on accommodating service animals. The store where the incident happened went even further, creating a veterans' corner inside their locations. The space offered free coffee and a quiet place for veterans to rest, along with resources for those needing assistance. Jack visited one of the stores and was moved to see veterans gathered there, some talking, others simply enjoying the camaraderie. "Looks like they're trying to make things right," Jack murmured to Charlie as they walked through the store. Charlie wagged his tail in approval, drawing smiles from shoppers as they passed. One evening, as Jack sat on his porch, he received a call from an unexpected person. "Brian, the manager from the store." "Mr. Harrison," Brian began, his voice hesitant. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Veterans United." Jack's grip on the phone tightened. He wasn't sure what to expect. "What can I do for you, Brian?" "I wanted to apologize personally," Brian said, his words slow but deliberate. "I was wrong that day. I didn't understand what you were going through, and I didn't take the time to learn. Watching everything unfold afterward has been eye-opening. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." Jack was silent for a moment. He had every reason to hold a grudge, but he also knew the power of forgiveness. "Apology accepted," he said finally. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do to fix them." Brian sighed, the relief evident in his tone. "Thank you, sir. I promise I'll do better." After ending the call, Jack leaned back in his chair, gazing at the stars. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it had the power to shape the future. Months later, Jack and Charlie received an invitation to a special event at the Pentagon. They arrived in Washington, D.C., greeted by military personnel and fellow veterans. The event was a culmination of the awareness campaign, celebrating the progress made in educating communities about the needs of service dog handlers. During the ceremony, a high-ranking official presented Jack with a plaque honoring his contributions. As the room erupted in applause, Jack felt an unfamiliar emotion, pride, not just in himself, but in the movement that had grown from a single moment of disrespect. As the event concluded, Jack stood with Charlie, who had been given his own honorary medal, a shiny tag engraved with the words "Loyal Companion" and "Hero." Jack knelt beside him, adjusting the medal around his neck. "Looks good on you, buddy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Charlie licked his face in response, drawing laughs from those nearby. That night, back in his modest home, Jack sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by letters from strangers who had been touched by his story. Some were veterans thanking him for shining a light on their struggles. Others were ordinary people who had gained a newfound respect for service dogs, and the veterans who relied on them. Jack picked up one letter written in a shaky hand. It was from an elderly woman whose husband had been a Marine. "Mr. Harrison," the letter read, "your courage has given me hope. My husband passed away years ago, but he would have been so proud of what you're doing. Thank you for standing up for what's right." Jack folded the letter carefully, placing it alongside the others in a box he labeled "Gratitude." He turned to Charlie, who was watching him intently. "We did good, didn't we, boy?" Charlie's tail thumped against the floor, his eyes full of loyalty and love. Jack smiled. "Let's get some rest. Tomorrow's another day, and there's still work to be done." As Jack turned out the lights, the house was filled with a quiet sense of peace. The road had been long and challenging, but it had led to something far greater than Jack could have imagined. And with Charlie by his side, he knew they could face anything the future held. Together, they had shown the world the power of respect, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a veteran and his service dog.